Today I'd like to talk about emptiness. What does emptiness mean when we talk about it in terms of in the context of waking up, in the context of enlightenment? Well, emptiness, of course, refers to a thing that is empty of something, like a cup or a glass is half empty, we might say. Emptiness really refers to non-self and to impermanence, if you will, and co-arising and interdependence. So, for example, the wonderful Zen Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh, he talked about seeing the emptiness in the flower, and it's one of the most beautiful teachings that I have ever encountered. So I'd like to provide the understanding of it to you as well. So, for example, if we look at a flower here, so at first glance we'll notice the color is white or orange, and we might notice the scent of the beautiful flower. And also, we like looking at flowers. It appeals to us in some way. There's something about a flower that just pleases us. We like to look at it. But all those things are the surface of the flower. So what we might learn here is to look deeper into the flower. So Thich Nhat Hanh teaches us, what do you see if you look deeper into the flower? Well, if we take a really good look to see what has gone into this flower, we realize that this flower is a non-self. It is nothing in itself. We see that it's a conglomerate of different elements that have come together to make this flower. And once we understand that, we can start seeing in the flower the entire cosmos. For example, let's make it more concrete. You look at the flower and you see the clouds. You see the rain clouds, and you see the rain that has nourished the flower. You see the dirt that it has come out of. You see the sunshine from the universe that has given it the heat that it needed to transform itself and use its universal intelligence to grow. Because the flower is never in doubt about how to become a flower. There's a universal intelligence that guides it. So we'll start seeing that different parts, the rain, the sunshine, the dirt, the nourishment from the leaves that have fallen on the ground, and all these different things. Perhaps there's been a gardener taking care of it, perhaps. All these different things come together and are all elements in the flower. And without these elements, the interconnectivity of these elements, there would not be a flower. So if you calm yourself, and by that I mean you quiet your mind and you are attentive, then nature is your greatest teacher of understanding that all is one, the interconnectivity of everything, the impermanence of all things that is. Now, I see that saying all is one has become a popular thing for people. It's like, oh yes, I understand. But what I also see is that most people understand it at an intellectual level. But understanding all is one, the interconnectivity of all things, the unity of being, understanding it as an experience based on a practice or the embodiment of it and feeling it and moving into being part of that unity, that's a different day, and that's what we want to work towards. Again, if you look at the forest, like I live in Denmark, from the northern countries at least. Come March, April, May, it's going to be an explosion in nature, right? Everything comes out, and like zillion of leaves are going to show themselves. But not one of them are at a single moment in doubt about how do I become a leaf? How do I become a flower, a bush? And the oak tree is not sitting there thinking, I wish I was a birch tree, right? It knows what it is, and it just is. Not that I'm implying that it has that kind of recognition, but it just is. And this is a very great place to be, where you and I can practice, a place that you and I can practice to be as well. Just understanding that you just are. Not that you are a teacher, a business person, a mother, a father, a friend, so forth. These are the roles you play, the roles you take on in this life. And that's fine. There's place for that as well. But that is in the external life. In the internal space, I invite you to create that space where you just think of yourself as being. When we look deeper, we start understanding that perhaps we have misinterpreted a lot of things in the past. So let's take an example. A person comes in the door and starts yelling at you and saying that you're an idiot and so forth. Really being mean and saying nasty stuff. Now, what do? If you are not aware and you're not in tune with your inner being, in a conscious state of mind and in the present, you're likely just to react to that, saying, who do you think you are? How do you think you can talk to me like that? And you respond immediately, react to the person. And it might seem fair at first, but what really you are responding to or reacting to is the surface of what's going on. You're just responding to the color of the flower, to the scent of the flower. You have ceased to look deeper, right? Because what happens when we look deeper? Well, we don't know, but we can say that an angry person is almost without exception a sad person. So why is a person sad? Well, a person is sad and it may cause anger as a result. But to begin with, a person is sad because the expectation in the head is not corresponding to what is in the external world. So there's a mismatch between what is inside and what is outside. And therefore, the person becomes really sad. And if it causes great emotions, that it's the only way this person feels like it can let go of these emotions is through anger. And that's when we become unconscious, right? Because anger is an unconscious response and reaction to what is. But if we understand that as the receiver of the anger, instead of escalating it, we can look at it for what it is, actually. Okay, we have a person here that is really angry. I understand that this person is really sad, disappointed in some way, that the reality is not what he or she hoped for it to be. And then you can turn your own reaction, your own anger that you might first evoke in you because your ego has been hurt by being called these words. Now you can turn it and say, oh, this person really needs a hug. Because otherwise you wouldn't be feeling all these strong emotions. You can tell how the person is totally wrapped up in these emotions. That's why when we say that an angry person has lost it, that's a pretty good expression actually, because the person has completely lost connection to his or her inner being. So you see, when we look deeper, we get a completely different understanding of how to interact with the external world. Now, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen Buddhist that I mentioned before, lived in Plum Village in France, where he created a monastery, a community. And they would invite people in for meditations and learning mindfulness and so forth. And at some point, they had invited a kindergarten. So he tells this story that he's walking with him and his group are walking with this group of kids out in the forest on the trails, and he noticed that a little girl has been quiet for a while. And she seemed rather contemplative. And then she says, "Grandpa Monk, what color is the bark on the trees?" And Tai, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's also called Tai, he knew that if he said, well, the bark on the trees is brown, then he knew that he would stop her thinking process. He would stop her creative thinking process. She would stop being curious. So instead he says, "What color do you think it is?" And the girl continued to think about, And as she was curious, and the story ends there, but as you can imagine, the little girl continues to be curious about the colors of the bark on the trees, right? So now you can imagine she'll start seeing different nuances. She won't just see one color that can describe all trees. She will find a multitude of colors. Some places there'll even be moss on the tree bark, and there might be insects that leave their little footprints and so forth. And she's now exploring and continuing to become wiser and more knowledgeable about trees and the bark on the trees. So the learning from this is that once we call things something, then we sort of stop being curious and we get the illusion, now we know, right? And that's why words can be a hindrance for thinking rather than a help for thinking. Labeling things is one way of stopping thought. So you have to remember that you have to keep thinking beyond the thought. So once you think that you know that things are like they are, that is not the case. Very likely you can look much deeper, because there's the non-self of the tree as well, just as in the flower. In the tree, you'll see all the different elements. You will see all the things around in your apartment or your house or wherever you live. All things around you have a non-self. They are impermanent. They are made up of different parts, just as we are as a human being. Once we start to practice this understanding, we realize that our interpretations of things have been wrong. We've been too soon, often, to judge, to evaluate and conclude what is actually going on around us. And we have to remember that when we do that, when you judge somebody or something, or you are opinionated, you are viewing the world through your own eyes, through your own perception. And these glasses, so to speak, that you are looking through are conditioned by the country you've grown up in, the family, culture, the local community, your parents, your immediate family, and so forth, including all the stuff going on in social media, on TV, and all these things come together to make you look at the world in a certain way, to put specific labels on things. And if you stop with the labels, as we discussed just before, then you know that you are veiling things. So you see very limited. Your sight is very limited, and the perspective on the world is lacking much. So that's why we talk about living in an illusion of things. So once you start looking deeper into things, understanding what's below the surface, and opening your heart to understanding and seeing, right? That's an important part, opening your heart to understanding and seeing, looking deeply. Because oftentimes we can easily be too quick to judge, and because that pleases the ego. What are we saying when somebody else is wrong? We're actually just patting ourselves on the shoulder saying, I'm right. And that's very satisfying to the ego, right? But in the long term, it's not going to be good for you. It's detrimental to your long-term understanding, because somewhere deep inside you, in your inner core being, you know that this is not right. It's not right to judge. Can I truly understand the other person? You may ask yourself. Because if you cannot, then how can you judge another person? Right? And very few times we can say we have the privilege of truly understanding another person. We don't know their background. We don't know the context. So we can, in that sense, free ourselves from that kind of judgment, and free ourselves from pretending to know that kind of reality. But it's also an invitation to always look deeper, to always search for more, in that sense, search for that greater understanding, connecting your knowledge to wisdom. Knowledge in itself can only get you so far. We see that now, right? In these days. Knowledge without wisdom is a dangerous cocktail, right? So you want to be sure that you tune into that greater being, your inner knowing, and access that wisdom. For you to make wise choices, how you want to go about living in this world, how you want to go about unveiling, the path to your soul, which is as such not a path, because your soul and your enlightenment is there. It's just been covered by all the conditioning and you believing different narratives about your life. You are free to let go of these narratives, right? And in the end, you are free to gather all the information about how to open up into this greatest source, your higher being and your all-knowing self, and stand comfortable in that knowing of your inner being. Because when you do that, you connect to your inner peace, the collective soul, which you will find inside, and you will find with that an inner peace and a joy, and the searching you might find, because a lot of people are searching without being able to exactly pinpoint what they're searching for, but they just feel like there's some kind of lack in their life. They need something more. Once you connect to that inner being, that's what you search for. And once you connect to that and calm yourself and do the training and the practice, the search will stop. And it's a fantastic feeling. So I invite you to do a little bit of practice, to be quiet, sit in stillness, no telephone, no TV, no computer. Just sit with yourself and breathe. We breathe continuously throughout our life, and yet we don't pay much attention to breathing. And just quiet your thoughts. Don't judge your thoughts. Just quiet your mind down. And you'll start feeling yourself. You can start feeling your body, right? And all of a sudden, you allow yourself to tune in to that. And it takes a little bit of practice. You can't there's no quick fix, right? We like quick fixes these days, right? We like efficiency, quick fixes. 10 tips for doing this and learning that. Learn a new language in 10 days. right? We've all seen it. But it does take a little bit of tuning in. You don't have to sit for a half hour or so. No, just take a few seconds during the day and make it a habit. Perhaps when you get your coffee, make it a habit that every time you pour yourself a coffee or a cup of tea, just tuning in, let go everything you're holding on to, and just tell yourself all the energies I have there. I was angry at my boss, my friend did this, my husband or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever did that. You have all these energies sitting out there that you spend it on, because the thoughts just they continue to roll in your head. So then just when you drink your coffee, just make a habit. Just take that second and say, I'm going to take all my energies home, because you need those energies, right? To be in a positive state and a high frequency, because it's all energy, right? Everything is energy. Like 20 years ago, people would say that's mumbo jumbo. Today, we've given the Nobel Prize for it. So if you don't know about things being all energy, we can talk about that another day if you like. But take your energies home, because every time you have a talking thing going on in your mind, you're a little upset about somebody or something that happened, or it drains you. You're staying in the past, you're worried about the future, stressed about the future. Oh, I need to do this and this and this and this. Fine, just park those worries. I mean, they'll be there in 30 seconds to return to. They're not going anywhere, don't worry. So just take that little space of time to tune into your inner being. Make it a habit. Once you go up the stairs, go down the stairs, have a cup of coffee, whatever works for you, it doesn't matter. That's my invitation to you today. Understanding the emptiness of things, understanding the interconnectivity, understanding that the flower is made up of 1,000 elements. That when we look deeper, it's not just one color, one scent. We see so much more than what we do in our daily surface view of the world. Have a great day.